In today's episode, we are going to talk about that how Stalin had staged the man-made famine which killed millions of people in Ukraine. So let's understand that how it all started. With the introduction of collective farming by Stalin, the government had forced people to give up their lands and to give up their personal property in the collective farming. This triggered a deep production gaps, disorganization of rural economy and food starvation, etc. Now the question is that why was it that the price of collective farming had fell very severely upon Ukrainians? Now, interestingly, why was it that Stalin was so obsessed with Ukraine that Stalin was in mood to snatch away the right to food from the Ukrainians? The question is why. So we can understand about his obsession through one of his quoting, and I'm quoting this one. He once wrote to his colleague Lazar Kaganovich in August 1932, and he says that if we don't make an effort now to improve the situation in Ukraine, we may lose Ukraine. So basically what was going on in Ukraine was that there was some revolts and revolution, that a counter revolution that was going on in Ukraine, and for Stalin it was necessary to suppress the people of Ukraine, so to keep Ukraine under his control, and he utilized this collective farming and food, the hunger, as the tool of suppression. And let me explain how. So in order to suppress the voice of Ukraine, Stalin had made a strategic target by targeting the influential people. For example, by targeting the church leaders, targeting the intellectuals and the people from the Communist Party of Ukraine who were pro-Ukraine in their policy. Now, with the introduction of the 5-year plan and with the idea of the collective farming as well, Stalin had the control of all the farmlands in Ukraine, and he could extract as many as grains he wanted. Initially, majority of the rural Ukrainians defied to give up their land and personal property, but the Soviet army and the Red Army had brutally suppressed and forced them to give up their land and their livestock and the farming land, and to work on the government collective land instead. According to historian, it was said that almost 4,000 people had rebelled against this draconian law, but ultimately that was crushed by the Soviet police and the Red Army. Again, the wealthy and the successful farmers of Ukraine had resisted and had opposed this draconian law, but instead of listening to these voices, they were labeled as kulak and was considered and was labeled as kulak and was presented by the Soviet propaganda as villain. They were declared as the enemy of the state, and their properties, livestock, and everything, you can consider everything was confiscated by the state. Now, in order to suppress the voice of the common Ukrainian, Stalin had introduced the decree of 5 stalks of grain. By this new law, it stated that anyone, including a child, if somebody is caught taking any grains from the collective field, it would be considered as crime, and the punishment would be either shot at the spot and imprisonment. At the beginning, 54,000 were tried and sentenced, and almost 2,000 people were executed. Stalin did not stop here. He ensured that the Ukrainians do not get food. He had introduced the idea of internal passport, which was denied to the farmers, and so in order to travel outside of Ukraine, so the farmers had to take permission from the Red Army and the Soviet police. The travel restriction was to ensure that the Ukrainians did not move out of Ukraine in order to search for food. Again, at the time of Holodomor, over 1/3 villages were blacklisted as they failed to fill the criteria of the given quota. Blacklisted villages were blockaded by the Soviet police and the Red Army, and due to which the Ukrainians were denied access to move out of Ukraine in search of food, and also to receive any food supplies or smuggling any food supplies within Ukraine. So Stalin did not stop here. He had appointed special commission and brigades whose job was to search the houses of peasants and to find out the last handful of food that the peasants might have hidden in order for their own consumption. Now, it seems that the Soviet government was adamant that they would not allow the Ukrainians to have the right to eat, to have the right to food, and to escape the death by starvation. People started eating anything that they find edible. They started eating grass, dogs, cats. Cases of even cannibalism was also recorded. The situation was very chaotic. It was lawlessness, theft, and lynching. Now, it was said that the effect of the Holodomor was felt in June 1933, where it was recorded, according to the study done by a team of Ukrainian Institute of Demographic and Social Studies and University of North Carolina Chapel Hill. They estimated that the people in Ukraine were dying at the rate of 28,000 per day, and around 3.9 million Ukrainians died during Holodomor from 1932 to 33. The irony was that Ukrainians were dying due to starvation, due to lack of food, which was a man-made disaster. The Soviet state had extracted 4.27 million tons of grains from Ukraine, which was enough to feed 12 million people an entire year. So it suggested that Soviet Russia had already enough stock to feed the people in in his own state. Rather, what he did was that he extracted all these grains and he exported so to earn money to feed his Soviets, to feed the Soviet state. And all these atrocities with the Ukrainian people were happening under the nose of the entire world, and people were not even had any idea that what was going on unless a journalist named Gareth Jones visited Ukraine and saw the misery of the Ukrainian people at the time of Holodomor. Media in Soviet Russia was under surveillance. Even under the tight surveillance, very few journalists were able to crack and was able to get out to take the information of Ukraine to the entire world and to tell the problem of the Ukrainians before the entire world. Out of many stories, Holodomor's story is one of the story that would help us understand about the Russian oppression over Ukraine. And it is necessary for us to know the story of Holodomor or the stories like that to understand the psyche of Ukraine. Hi, so this is the end of this video. If you like this episode, then please do like, share and comment. I would be happy to hear from you. What do you think? And see you in the next episode.